There we go. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the October 6th, 2020 council meeting. Reminder that this meeting will be live streamed, recorded, and available on the internet by visiting the Town of Parry Sound's website at www.parrysound.ca, and that will be on YouTube. So prior to the open session, council met for a closed session. It was moved by Councillor Borneman, seconded by Councillor McCann, that pursuant to section 239(2) and 3 of the Municipal Act SO 2001 C25 as amended, Council of the Corporation of the Town of Parry Sound moved to a meeting closed to the public in order to address the matters pertaining to C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land for a municipal or local board purposes, boundary negotiations, E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board, contract work on town property. F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, contract or work on town property. And K, a position or plan, procedure, criteria, or instructions to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board, boundary negotiations, wellness center, pool, cost sharing, and site selection. That was carried. The meeting was pretty much had, but there is one more item to be dealt with, which will be dealt with after the open session. Okay. Any additions or prioritization of the agenda? No? Okay, mover and seconder for the agenda, please. Councillor McCann, Councillor Keith, that the council agenda for October 6, 2020 be approved as circulated. All in favor? Did it back different on that one. Any disclosure, pecuniary interest of the general nature thereof? Nope. Okay. May I have a mover and seconder for the minutes, please? Councillor Backman and Councillor Burden, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held September 15th, 2020 be approved as circulated. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, anyone opposed to the passing of the minutes? Nope, that's carried then. Questions of staff? Councillor Backman?
Yes, my question this evening is for Mr. Robinson Taylor, and I'd just like to find out if he can give us an update on the Active Transportation Committee.
Doesn't look like Taylor's on.
Oh, okay. Well, I will follow up with him. Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Oops, I've just lost my screen. Okay. There. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Keith?
Yes, Mr. Cairns, I'm just wondering, has there been a further investigation regarding some sort of a hand railing for the bottom part of that hill on the Cascade Hill, please?
Yes, through you, Your Worship. So we have been looking at it, and it appears that the plans when Cascade Street was redone included the replacement of that hand railing. So much to the surprise of many of the current staff that didn't realize it wasn't there anymore, we have been looking at options. One of our challenges is to make sure that it stays there during winter control operations. So that's so yes, it is under consideration, and we will come up with a design that will provide safety along the edge as well as allowing for winter maintenance to occur.
Any further questions? No? Okay. Ms. Johnson, correspondence, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. There are there's 7 items of correspondence. The first is from Canadian Pacific, CP, notifying the town that they have made a decision that to hold a virtual holiday themed concert for the CP holiday train. They are not having the regular train that goes through the town and on its route. The second item is from Phenom. It is, there are several items, there are a couple of documents from Phenom. They're both related, and they're both regarding discussions that Phenom had at the recent meeting supporting Starlink, a satellite internet service. So there's a media release as part of this and their resolution. The third item is from AMO. It is a copy of a letter to Phenom, and it is acknowledging the information and Phenom's response in opposition of making DSABs oversight boards of OPP. So AMO is simply acknowledging that and has taken that off the table. The next item is from Lisa Thompson, the Minister of Government and Consumer Services, and it is an acknowledgement of the AMO delegation or the delegation to the minister at the AMO conference. It was a virtual delegation, of course, acknowledging the town's position on their interest in acquiring 7 Bay Street lands currently occupied by the Ministry of Natural Resources, and the town's interest, the area's interest in keeping those jobs in the area. The fifth item is from the DBA Beautification Committee, expressing appreciation and compliments on the town gardens this year. And they make specific mention of the hanging baskets and the Market Square Park gardens, acknowledging the choice of plants, the colors, the height, those sorts of things, and noting that they've also heard compliments. So that was, they wanted to pass that on and have copied that to the manager of Parks and Recreation and staff. The sixth item is a resolution from the town of Amherstburg. It's a request that the provincial government extend by 1 year the deadline, the compliance deadline for websites to comply with AODA requirements. Currently, the deadline is January 1st of 2020. They're asking for a 1-year extension to January 1st, 2021, and had sent that resolution on. Councillor Keith had requested that this item be considered for council's support as well. So it is item 9.5 on the agenda. And the last item is from CN Rail, notifying the town that it is on its 100th anniversary, and it had plans for that have had to be canceled because of COVID-19. They are also notifying the town, though, that they'll be making $10,000 donation to a public library in the community. So we'll be following up with CN to see how that is to be activated. And that is all the correspondence.
Thank you. Okay, we don't have any deputations, so we'll go to reports, and we'll start with Councillor McCann tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council staff, and public. A couple of meetings to report on. Wednesday morning, September 23rd, I attended the Belvedere Heights Board of Management monthly meeting via Zoom. Our medical director, Dr. Clark, made a presentation. Finance and executive reports were received, and the board was brought up to date on the fundraising efforts of the Friends of Belvedere and how the monies raised are helping with extra expenditures that are not covered by provincial funding or municipal levies. Management reported that staff continue surveillance testing for COVID-19. It's ongoing. The board received various updates from the Ministry of Long-Term Care regarding news that A class action lawsuit's been launched in this province on behalf of residents in 96 Ontario long-term care homes. It's been launched, and I mention this because we just want our people to know that our board wants to reassure that Belvedere is continuing to follow all of the recommendations related to this matter. We also have some concern that when our insurance comes up in February with COVID rearing its ugly face, we're not sure what to expect in terms of insuring ourselves going forward in 2021. Like lease manager reported regular maintenance, and we have one unit for sale right now, one life lease unit. It's number 205. I believe it overlooks the water. It's a beautiful unit. If you are interested, please contact our life lease manager. And last but not least, I want to welcome Cheryl Ward of Seguin Township. She has been appointed as one of 2 of our provincial representatives on the Board of Management. And I know she's excited about working with us. She certainly comes to us with a lot of experience, having been involved with the West Parry Sound Health Center. Thursday evening, September 24th, I attended the West Parry Sound District Museum. Again, it was a monthly meeting electronically. We heard from our treasurer, we got financial statements, business managers report, our collection policy was reviewed. The museum is participating in the Speedier project with the installation of a hot water controller, a level 2 charger, and a Telsa power wall. Emergency MAP funding in the amount of $32,000 was received, as well as $8,000 for wage subsidy. The museum has applied for a Trillium grant going towards the completion of the E. Roy Smith Gallery. And our business manager is also working on a virtual Museum of Canada application in favor of the development of a virtual exhibit featuring the Beatty Covenant. Well, we had somebody join one of our boards, and we have someone leaving. We want to bid farewell to our board member and chair, Jim Marshall. He's tendered his resignation this week, and he's been very, very busy with his own business affairs, more so than he thought. So he served on the board for 6 years. After his term of council, he continued with great passion to participate on the museum board. It's anticipated that our board member, Rob Wood, is interested in taking over as chair, and I suspect that will be made official at our next meeting. And finally, Friday morning, September 25th, I had the opportunity to attend a personal protection equipment training session at the Parry Sound Fire Hall. This and other training sessions have been made available to staff and volunteers of the Parry Sound Community Support Services. So that is my report, and thank you very much.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Backman.
I have had no meetings since our last council, so I have nothing to report this evening. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Councillor Horn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, on September 28th, I was not able to attend the Parry Sound Area Planning Board meeting. I understand that there was 14 applications that were heard, but it was my 30th anniversary for Heidi and I for our wedding. So I thought planning board, 30th anniversary. So I did skip the planning board. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you. Probably a wise decision. Councillor Keith.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, fellow councilors, staff, and the public. I chaired the Parry Sound Area Planning Board meeting. 13 applications, 11 were approved, 2 were deferred, finance is approved, and there was a discussion regarding the town of Parry Sound leaving the Parry Sound Area Planning Board. It was voted that a representative from Municipal Affairs and Housing be invited to the next meeting so there could be more opportunity for discussion. And that's my only report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Burden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Relatively brief report. On September 23rd, I took part in a regular meeting of the Industrial Park Board. The board has agreed to invest along with ViaNet in a tower to supply the park with high-speed internet. This should be a great asset to the businesses in the park and certainly will be an asset to the park when trying to attract new businesses. On September 30th, I took part in a special meeting of the Parry Sound District Social Services Board to discuss a building project on the eastern side of the district. This was a closed meeting, so I'm not able to discuss the details of the meeting at this time. And that is my report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Borneman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I attended the September 23rd Belvedere Heights Board meeting along with Councillor McCann. I too would like to welcome Ms. Ward. She brings a wealth of experience and is well known to most at our table, at least. Subsequently, I took part in a governance committee meeting at Belvedere. It'll be brought forward to our October 28th meeting for further discussion and consideration at that time. Same day as Councillor Burden just mentioned, I attended at the Industrial Park as well. I want to thank Liz McWalters and Smart Community for their the active role they played in facilitating that, and also the Township of the Archipelago for partnering with ViaNet in the park and provision of high speed. It will not only serve the park, it'll enable further towers to be built that will hopefully eventually service Point of Barrow and perhaps east to Whitestone as well. And earlier this morning, I had another live meeting in a hangar. They're starting to get a little chilly, but we survived. Airport is actually doing quite well. We've exceeded our revised COVID budget targets. We do recognize that the next few months will be rather leaner, so we're sort of holding our optimism to a cautious level at this point. We have received several inquiries with respect to property. Hydro is in the process of relocating a couple of poles where the transfer station had been at the corner, which will open up additional building property that's pretty visible both from the roadway and the highway as well. So these are all good things for the airport. And there are a number of people, there have been a number of private hangars change hands and a number of folks inquiring about those as well. So business as usual at the airport. And that's my report for this evening.
Thank you. I'll be trying to be brief with mine. September 17th was an AMO pre-meeting and then a MOU meeting with the government in the afternoon. Also on the 17th, there was the official opening for Twig's Restaurant. Congratulations to Roseanne and Rob Baskey on the opening and their franchise. September 24th was another AMO executive meeting, and then at 4 p.m. on the 24th, the area mayors got together for a conversation. September 25th was an AMO board meeting, and September 30th was a special DSAB board meeting. And October 2nd, I attended the first concert at the Stocky Center since the reopening of the center. It was a joint effort between the Festival of the Sound, the Town of Parry Sound, and the Stocky Center. The hall was limited to 50 people, and COVID protocols were in place. The hall was limited again to, so the hall with 50 people in it looked pretty sparse, but the addition to this is that tickets were also sold online and the concert was zoomed out. So it was a great concert and people really enjoyed it. So certainly a big thank you to everyone involved. The musicians were wonderful. This was a test to see what can be done and maybe is the future for the Stocky Center. Even when we come out of this, it may draw a larger audience. So we'll see where this goes. Anyway, that's my report. Thank you. So into the meeting. First item moved by Councillor Backman and second by Councillor Horn. That council accept the quote from Safe and Sound Locksmithing for the installation of security access controls fob system for the municipal office in the amount of $18,290. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Nope. Okay, that's carried. Moved by Councillor McCann, second by Councillor Backman, that council accept the tender from Adams Brothers for snow removal on town streets during the 2020 fall and winter season and 2021 winter and spring season, including traffic control and labor costs to clear around infrastructure, including tree pits, hydrants, as follows. Tandem dump truck, $95.99 per hour. Wheel loader, $111.81 per hour. Blower and control unit, $111.81 per hour. This tender being the only one received. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Nope. Seeing no one opposed, it's carried. Moved by Councillor McCann and second by Councillor Burden that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Parry Sound received the report attached as Schedule A on the reopening of the Bobby Orr Community Center for information purposes. It's moved by Councillor McCann and second by Councillor Burden. Discussion, and I believe, yes, April is here. Ms. McNamara, can you give a synopsis of the reopening the Bobby Orr Community Center?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm happy to advise Council that the Bobby Orr Community Center has been reopened under Provincial Law Reg 364-20 and the associated guidelines for community centers, recreation facilities. That being said, we've looked and we're approaching the reopening in 3 phases. I'm pleased to advise we accommodated our first ice rentals last week. We have groups on the ice this evening right now as well. So the first phase was accommodating the ice rentals and all the ice users under the new guidelines and new protocols. The second phase of our opening is when we'll entertain all of the private rentals, of course, under the operating guidelines. And the third phase is when we're looking to return to town programming, so all of our own recreational programming. Each phase has the associated guidelines and protocol that go along with opening different areas of the facility to the public. All of these protocols have been vetted with the North Bay Parry Sound District Health Unit, and they, as long as we operate under those guiding principles, we are good to have our doors open. Council will be pleased to know that this is all a culmination of a lot of work. Staff has been working on a regional basis with a lot of rec managers in the region. So Bracebridge, Huntsville, Gravenhurst, Sigwin, we go far north, and we always go as far south as Aurelia. We meet weekly right now, and we've invited the health unit and health unit representation to these meetings, and that has been very valuable in creating these opening and these response plans. So things are going well at this time under our new protocols, and we're looking forward to a time when we can have our private rentals back in the facility. Once we have completed our protocols around town programming and around our own programming, we will be vetting those protocols with public health to ensure we have interpreted the guidelines as intended, and we'll be moving forward in that direction. Our first rental is in the building on October 21st. And hopefully we will see town programming come the beginning of November. I'd like to take this opportunity to advise council that we are listening to the resident, we are listening to the ratepayer. The message has been heard loud and clear. Seniors would like to return to programming when possible. So that is our first priority when it comes to town programming. Will be fulfilling the seniors requirement, because if council is not aware, the YMCA has closed its doors to programming. The senior center, they're closed right now. They don't have an anticipated reopening date. Brad's a community programmer. He's been meeting with the YMCA as well as the senior center, and they've been talking with many seniors in the area about programming, what the needs are, and how we best accommodate all of that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff on this one? Councillor Borneman.
Good evening, Ms. McNamara. I see your name, but I can't see you. You and I have chatted about this a number of times, April. Are we beginning to see what we hope will be kind of a trickle back of effect for some of the user groups who maybe have been hesitant about coming back to the arena?
Through your worship, there are guidelines in place, and if the users, I've been working with a lot of users to come up with creative solutions to problems that are as a result of these guidelines. The reality is we all have to abide by the rules and come up with best case scenarios. The reality is we've had an emergence of new groups come who can play by the rules, and they are renting ice time.
Okay, all right. Question, this will go on the website?
Through your worship, everything is currently on the website. It has been updated.
Good.
If folks would like to visit, and even just type in Bobby Community Center, all the
Okay.
information with regard to programming, rentals, and the ice surface in particular, all the information is there at their fingertips.
Great, great. That's good. Councillor Bachman.
Thank you, Mayor McGarvey. In regards to programming, is the town looking at any additional programming, virtual programming for those that may not be willing to participate in public and in groups? I saw that we did some yoga, a virtual yoga earlier in the year, and I'm just wondering what the discussions are around that.
Your worship, absolutely, it is being explored. We all know that YouTube exists. YouTube has many free online recreation courses. So our best efforts may be in sourcing quality programming through that and directing persons to that. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel if it already exists. We can point the masses to existing virtual programming if that's what they're looking for.
Any other questions? Nope. Anyone opposed to the information? Nope, it's carried. Thank you. So moved by Councillor Borneman, second by Councillor McCann, that the Town of Parry Sound Council appoint Councillor Irene Smith, representing the municipalities of Nipissing, Powassan, and Callender to the Parry Sound EMS Advisory Committee for the remainder of the term of council. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Nope, that's carried. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Bachman, second by Councillor Keith, that the town of Parry Sound accept the bid by Croft Industrial in the amount of $1,598,718 plus HST for the construction and delivery of a floating breakwater and replacement of Dock C per the tender submission, and that previously approved budget amount of $1,293,240 from the Big Sound Marine Reserve be used to fund this project, and an additional budget of $400,000 towards Dock C contingency, HST engineering and other provisional items be approved to be funded temporarily from the Capital Asset Legacy Reserve Fund, and that these funds temporarily borrowed from the Capital Asset Legacy Reserve Fund be repaid over a 4-year term with interest equivalent to the town's current interest on reserve fund bank accounts over the term applied to the outstanding amount borrowed. That the repayment of the temporary borrowing begin in the 2021 budget year, and that the total revised budget for this project be $1,693,240, including the breakwater, provisional items, Dock C, contingency, and engineering costs. Discussion. Councillor McCann.
Maybe this is a dumb question. It's a quick one. If we're borrowing from our reserves, where does the interest come into this? Are we just paying the interest back to ourselves then? Or am I missing something?
Ms. Phillips?
Yes, thank you. So our reserve funds currently earn an interest rate at the bank. So our reserve policy requires that if we temporarily borrow from those funds, that we repay the monies, including interest, what we would have been generating in that account already, to make that reserve whole again.
Great. Well, I learned something new today. Thank you.
Welcome.
Councillor Bornman.
Mr. Cairns, for the public's knowledge, how long do we anticipate these repairs? What kind of life cycle are we looking at with respect to the work that's being done here? Is this going to be an annual thing, or you know, how long will this work last?
I'm not sure if Mr. Thompson wants to speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely. The life expectancy of docks of this nature are 30 to 40 years. The Dock C that's being replaced is actually currently over 40 years old. It is failing drastically at this point. So that is typical. There are some enhancements that are being put on or proposed with these docks that weren't available 40 years ago when Dock C went in. Whether that'll extend the lifetime extensively or not, I wouldn't hazard a guess, but that would be generally the time frame.
Okay. Any further questions? Councillor Keith?
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Thompson, is there any guarantee with this work, like afterwards, so that we're not feeling like we're into a money pit situation? Like, is there a guarantee of or warranty of something? Yeah, I know you said about 30 years, but the workmanship that we'll feel comfortable with.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I can say is that we're working with a known contractor who has done a great amount of work for us in the past at this facility. Both Docks A and Dock B have been replaced by this particular contractor. They are well built. They have not caused any extensive problems, not on the dock workmanship in the least. Crop has been exceptionally responsive to any of our requests for repairs. In terms of emergency repairs that have been required for Dock C, they immediately come to the facility whenever it's needed. Our relationship with them has been fantastic for the 3 years that I've been looking after this since Lynn left. In the specific tender, no. To answer your question extremely directly, There aren't warranties or guarantees, but our past experience with this particular builder is excellent.
Well, thank you. I think that if we've had a good quality service before, we can only go on the assumption that we will get it again. And I'm hoping this will be the case, because this is a lot of money again, but thank you.
Anything further? No, anyone opposed to the project? For the resolution? No, so it's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and second by Councillor Horn that council receive the attached report on COVID impacts on fall events for information purposes. And Chief Thompson, do you want to go through and maybe identify the background as to what's in the report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is mainly a report just generally about the broader community events that occur over the fall and winter. So as you can see in here, we're referencing things that the town does not have direct control over, such as Halloween or Remembrance Day or the Santa Claus Parade. That being said, there is the community is going to look to the town for direction as these events approach. Ms. McNamara has been in contact with many of the organizations that are involved in these types of events. She is staying in tune with them and staying as updated as possible. A health unit is advising us that they're expecting certain things to happen, but they are not releasing any specific guidance notes as of yet. They want to wait till see what the framework or the situation with regards to COVID-19 is closer to these events before they provide specific guidance. And we're going to want to align our messages with what the health unit puts out. So as that information comes forward, we'll be communicating it to council as well as to the general public in trying to create a cohesive message with the health unit for these broader community initiatives.
Thank you, Chief Thompson. I appreciate staff reaching out like this. I know I thought that it was certainly important that we have that discussion with the health unit so that we can make sure that there are updates coming so the public is aware. And I appreciate that. Any comments, questions? No? Any opposed to the report? No, it's carried then. Moved by Councillor Borneman, second by Councillor McCann. Whereas the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act to 2020 SO 2020 C18 expanded the opportunity for municipal councils, local boards, and their committees to meet electronically. And whereas in response, council passed bylaw 2020-7061, preventing by means of a resolution a certain expanded terms of electronic participation at meetings of council, local boards, and its committees. And whereas pursuant to bylaw 2020-7061, council extended by resolution 2020-082 until October 31st, expanded terms of electronic participation at meetings. And whereas recent provincial reports identify a current second wave of COVID-19 infections worse than the first, prompting a return to more stringent public health precautionary measures. Now therefore be it resolved, the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Parry Sound extends until March 31st, 2021, the terms of electronic participation at meetings of council, local boards or committees of either of them per the following. Electronic participation counts towards quorum. Electronic participants are permitted to vote, and electronic participation is permitted in meetings closed to the public. Any discussion? No? Anyone opposed to the resolution? No one's opposed. That's carried. Thank you. Moved by Counselor Backman, second by Counselor Horn, that council approves continued implementation of the internal safety protocols set out in the plans attached to Schedule A and B. Continued restriction on public access to the municipal office and fire hall until the end of the year of 2020, at which time it will be reassessed. Who wants to give a synopsis of this corporate plan?
Mr. Mayor, I'll speak more to the item itself and the about remaining closed to the public for a couple of months longer. What's important, I think, to recognize is we followed the guidance of the public health unit. We followed the guidance from the province since the beginning of COVID in mid-March. Throughout all that time, and unlike many municipalities, the town offices have continued to provide all the services that we would normally provide through this office, albeit by different means. We've changed our processing. In some cases, we encouraged suppliers to send us electronic invoices rather than paper invoices. More residents are paying their bills electronically, so that's been a positive thing. There was a lot of work involved at the staff level to reorient processes, to get people set up with technology, communicate what we're doing. But again, it's important to emphasize that all the services that we normally provide to the residents are still being provided, and throughout that time were provided. What was also of interest is we were approached by other residents of other municipalities wanting services that weren't available in their local municipality. Marriage licenses and things such as commissioning documents. So we were open and provided those services. What's the situation in the province with the concern over rising cases of COVID, Quebec and Ontario particularly, and our proximity to the GTA? And there's a lot of residents that travel back and forth, as well. A lot of guests also come up, visitors from the GTA. We're also in the midst of flu season, or starting that, plus back to school. So we thought it was prudent to not open the facilities to the public, still maintaining all the services until perhaps January to get a better read on things. A lot of services that the town provides are essential services. Residents don't have other options to go to another grocery store or another gas station or whatever, another restaurant. So we're trying to be extremely careful on making this a safe work environment, both for the residents who want to do business with us and for the staff that work out of the office. There's a plan attached, a corporate plan. That's kind of an umbrella plan that all, whether it's the Stocky Center or the wastewater, water treatment plant, BOCC, or what have you, the fire hall, that is an umbrella plan that all staff, all facilities must follow. And then there's individual specific plans. We spent a lot of time, a lot of consultation with staff to come up with both the corporate and the facility specific plan for the town offices and the fire hall. And it still may need to change over time because the POA courts are kind of a little bit of an uncertainty of the timing that, and just as the situation changes on the ground, we may have to modify the plan. But I think we've got good plans in place, and a credit to the staff for commenting on the plans. And I think a lot of credit goes to the staff for continuing to provide services to the public throughout this entire period to date. That was the comments I wanted to make, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. All right, any other staff? Chief Thompson, did you want to add anything? No, guess not. Ms. Lesperance, did you want to add anything from an HR standpoint? No? Okay, all right.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add something that these
Okay.
plans have been reviewed with representatives in the Joint Health and Safety Committee, and the union executive has been involved, informed as we move through these various protocols.
Okay, very good. Any comments from council? No. Okay, again, and it will be on the website, town's website as well, Mr. Harris?
we'll make sure that there's already information about there, how to get services. So that's actually not changing.
Yeah,
Just make sure it's accurate.
okay, all right, very good. Okay, anyone opposed to the resolution? No, it's carried then. Moved by Councillor Horn and seconded by Councillor Keith that council approve the key performance objectives, KPOs, as set out in Schedule A. Who wants to?
Mr. Mayor,
Harris, are you going to comment on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as council will recall, in February, council approved an updated strategic plan for the municipality. The attached list of key performance indicators are set out to mirror the strategic goals set out in the plan. And then under each goal, we've identified key performance objectives with a lead department that's with the objective of making sure we move each of the strategic goals that council's identified to move them forward. This isn't a static plan, and so the KPOs aren't static. What we expect that KPOs will be added as we get into the budget process, as issues come up from time to time. So it's a living document. We'll be reporting quarterly on the progress on any particular one of the KPOs. Another thing that's happening, and later on the agenda, there's the modernization review. That's a review of the town's use of technology and opportunities that may be present. That's another thing that could really add some goals and objectives if we decide to implement and go in directions with technology. That could also affect the plan. One of the things that was important is a lot of the KPOs, they might be under one particular department, public works, finance, or what have you. But these are very large, broad goals, and they cross departmental lines. Asset management, finance is the lead on that, but it touches every department. So we put these KPOs together as a group so that we could understand if some of IT's time was required for asset management and IT's time was also required for other initiatives, we understood all the pressures and the resource constraints that we were putting on so that we didn't overextend ourselves. So it was important that we did this, I'll say it's a group exercise, because some of these topics are very complex and, as I mentioned, cross-departmental lines.
Questions, comments? Councillor Backman?
So just to clarify, we created a strategic plan that was 2020 to 2030.
Correct.
And so I guess my question is, at what point do we look at long-term objectives?
Through the mayor, I think that's going to be an iterative process. Partly, and I mentioned this previously, that we got a little bit behind the 8 ball on this, largely because of COVID. Many of the staff resources were just directed to managing COVID and trying to manage it within consistency across 7 municipalities in very changing circumstances and orders from the province. So that's something that'll get fleshed out over time.
Yeah, follow up.
In follow-up to that, is that, would there be opportunity for council to have a visioning session to discuss those long-term vision objectives, or is that something staff provides? If you can advise further on that.
Through the mayor, I think staff bring requests forward primarily through the budget process, but periodically at other times, and that's the opportunity and for staff to bring ideas forward. It's also opportunity when members of council often bring projects forward, identify things that they'd like at least considered in the budget. That's probably the main opportunity to add to this document.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
Any other questions, comments? Nope. Anyone opposed to the resolution? Nope, that's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and second by Councillor Burton, that on behalf of the Regional Economic Development Collaborative, Council authorizes staff to enter into a 3-year fixed contract for a regional economic development officer, provided that each member municipality agrees to cover their proportionate share of all employment-related costs in the form substantially as set out in this report. Mr. Harris, are you going to speak to this one?
Yes, if I could. We're in the final stages of making an offer of employment to an individual. And one of the issues that came up was OMERS benefits. Historically, the individual was employed by CB&DC. They're not an OMERS employer. The Economic Development Collaborative isn't a corporate entity, so we aren't able to, the entity isn't able to hire employees. They're not a corporation. So the question was asked, maybe if one of the municipality was to hire this individual, it's a 3-year contract, and would Parry Sound be interested? That would give the individual access to OMERS as a benefit. I indicated that I would be happy to bring that recommendation to council if that's the way the collaborative ultimately wants to proceed. So that's why the item is on today's agenda. We're going to be discussing how we want to proceed at tomorrow's EDO meeting. And the recommendation for the hiring, the management oversight of the individual would be by the collaborative, which is the area CAOs. Costs for conferences, training, travel, anything like that. There's a budget in the collaborative, but they just don't have the legal entity to hire someone. I made it clear to the CAOs that we wouldn't want to take on this responsibility as a town unless we knew that all the employment-related costs were backstopped by the area municipalities that are currently members. Currently, all area municipalities, all 7, are members of the Economic Development Collaborative. Oh, and we're also, Alicia has been helpful in reviewing the employment agreement that the collaborative was proposing, just to make sure that it's a good employment agreement, whether that employee ends up being a town contract employee or through CB&DC or some other municipality. But appreciate Alicia's comments and assistance with that.
Councilor McCann?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, is this in terms of the fact that we already have our own EDC or officer on hand, is this duplicating our own efforts and expenses as our own township?
Through the mayor, we've been a member of the Economic Development Collaborative for many years. And we had a regional EDO, I think there was one in place for at least the last 3 years. And we shared in that, the cost of having that person on board. I wouldn't say there's duplication, but it's certainly there's opportunities for them to work together. The regional EDO looks after interests of all 7 municipalities, including Parry Sound. Our economic development officers focus is more on the town of Parry Sound, plus the gets involved in the business park in Seguin and the industrial park in Carly. So that's the arrangement that's in place. Last time it was Glenn Barnton, and he organized things like the housing summit that we all participated in.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Borneman?
Mr. Harris, I think you mentioned the previous arrangement. And while it was being managed under the CBDC, there was, in my view, a disconnect with respect to any kind of reporting to the municipalities as to progress, planning, what was actually taking place and what was being done in that setting or in that arrangement. So I'm wondering if that's been contemplated and how that's to work, assuming that this goes forward.
Through the mayor, I think whether the individual is technically employed by the town or not, the importance of that position reporting to all 7 municipalities, providing some kind of a regular update is important, regardless of who technically on paper is the employer. So I think that's something that's important for us to ensure happens regardless.
Oh, Councillor Keith, and then Councillor Backman.
So just a quick question, Mr. Harris. I realize that you feel it is important about that accountability, but has that been discussed with the municipalities, and has there been any sort of an agreement so that it is clear this is what is going to happen afterwards?
What I would say is the concern or the hope that Councillor Borneman expressed is something that all councils would like to see more of. So I don't think there's any disagreement. One of the things that the conversations that we've had amongst ourselves, that's the collaborative steering committee, is the importance of reporting to the area municipalities. That's part of the new candidates or the new incumbents' role, is to do that communication. So that I don't think there's any disagreement on that at all.
Okay, Councillor Backman.
Just to clarify then, Mr. Clayton, then I guess the reporting that would come through that entity would either be in your report or in reports that they provide to the various municipalities?
Through the mayor, that could take a few different forms. Individual CAOs like myself could provide an update. On some kind of a basis, I think it would be good to have the individual in that regional economic development position physically attending a council meeting, not monthly, not every meeting, but perhaps once a quarter or semi-annually, so that you can put a name and a face and have that conversation and not have it 7 different messages through 7 different CAOs. And then as well as if they can't make in-person meetings, they could provide written reports.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, anyone opposed to the resolution? Nope, that's carried. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Burden, second by Councillor Keith. Whereas the town of Amherstburg passed resolution 2020-0914 -214 per attached Schedule A. Now therefore be resolved that the town of Parry Sound is hereby requests Province of Ontario extend the compliance deadline stated in section 14.4 of the OREG 191.11 under the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act to require designated public sector organizations to conform to WCAG 2.0 level AA by a minimum of 1 year to at least January 1st, 2022. And further, that the town of Parry Sound requests that the province of Ontario consider providing funding, support, and training resources to meet these compliance standards. Any discussion on this one? Anyone opposed to the resolution? Nope, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Keith, that bylaw number 2020 7072 being a bylaw to ratify the execution of a contract with Parry Group Consulting Limited to complete a technology review under the Municipal Modernization Program through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. That's missing from the cover here. Is that going to make a difference, or is that just a typo? Ms. Johnson?
Your worship, I didn't catch what it is that is missing. You're saying the cover page is missing?
No, it's the Municipal Modernization Program through, and what's here is the Ministry of Affairs and Housing.
It is just a typo and it won't affect the.
Okay, very good. That's what I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I apologize.
Anyway, that be considered as read a first time. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Carried. Moved by Councillor Borneman, second by Councillor McCann, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion. Councillor Borneman.
I can't see Mr. Pengra online either. I just wanted, oh, there he is. There he is.
Pop up for us.
He shall find, I guess. But so Forrest, I understand that there were a number of other proposals submitted. I'm wondering if this was a lengthy, detailed document that the Parry Group submitted to us. I'm wondering if you could explain how the assessment was done and what separated this proposal from the others that had been submitted.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to answer that. It was a very detailed response. In fact, all of the respondents had very, very similar responses. That was in part due to how we structured the request for proposal. Because what we're asking for is an incredibly large undertaking, particularly in very, very constrained timelines. We had to structure it with very tight parameters. If we allowed more leeway, like is typically done with a request for proposal, it would have been unwieldy. So long story short, most proposals were very similar in how they were structured. Some were stronger in how they laid out the project, the work plans, the budget, the scheduling, so on and so forth. Parry Group stood out in front of all of them, largely in part due to their experience in the municipal sector for information technology specifically. So Parry Group was actually previously Prior and Prior, which some of you may have heard of. They were a very, very popular municipal consulting firm. When the owners of Prior and Prior retired, Ben Parry, who had been a longtime employee, left with the remainder of the staff and formed Parry Consulting Group. So they've got a tremendous amount of experience, a very strong team, and most importantly, a tremendous amount of municipal experience, which is what we need, particularly considering the extremely constrained timeline.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay. Anyone opposed to passing the bylaw? Nope. And that is carried. Moved by Councillor Backman, second by Councillor Keith, that bylaw number 2020-7075 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2019-6915, the parking and traffic control bylaw to prohibit parking on Wabick Street be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? Carried. Moved by Councillor Backman, second by Councillor Keith, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Any discussion? Councillor McCann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly supporting this motion, but I thought maybe it would be helpful to have hear from our bylaw department with regards to the reasoning why we're going to prohibit parking on Wabick Street. So just for the public's benefit.
For you, your worship. The reason this amendment was being made is just to support the no parking that was identified as part of the reconstruction plan on Wabick. At that time, it was determined due to the reconstruction that they wanted to have no parking on Wabick right from Church Street all the way to Victoria. So this amendment just allows that to be included in the parking bylaw for enforcement purposes.
I think maybe Councillor Backman may want to speak to this, but I think there was some concern about the number of no parking signs that dot each side of the road going down. We wondered maybe if people living there might feel a little objective to the number of signs that are out there in their own particular neighborhood. And another question too, what makes it impossible for parking there, of course, too, are the curbs. Like there's no room for anyone to park there and have safe traffic flow going through at this point. Am I correct?
I believe that was identified as a concern prior to the reconstruction, that there was already issues with parking. Once the curbs were put in place, the sidewalk addition, that created an even narrower space for parking. So this was the solution for safety for parking on that street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Backman, then Councillor Borneman, then Councillor Keith.
Yes, just in regards to the signage, yeah, I was absolutely surprised when I drove down that street to see the signs, and I have the number of signs. I think that, again, I wasn't part of the decision making and the site approvals when this road was done. I wasn't part of council, but I understand that this was part of the council's approval. You know, I think from the corner of the street going up and down both sides, there's at least 20 to maybe more signs there. And I just think that there's got to be a better way that we can communicate no parking. And you know, and I hope to work with Mr. Cairns to, and I just think as a cyclist, you know, I think it's important that when, you know, again, I don't go back to the decision making on no, you know, bike routes or things like that. But as a biker now, and, you know, I'm thinking if I'm driving down that road, even just a bit, if I, you know, go into the curb, I'm going to hit a pole. Like you know, I rather, you know, again, I just, yeah, I'm really shocked that that would be the style, you know, you know, and I don't want to refer to, you know, the pollution of signage on highways and everything, but it's just so invasive. And you know, and I do see some concerns with those poles being so, you know, especially with us not having a bike lane. And, you know, that is our main route to our biggest attraction, you know, one of them, our largest. And I really encourage staff to look at this and figure out how, you know, I would hate to see that as we develop other streets in our community. I understand the parking because there were no curbs there before. And I'd like to give the residents the benefit of the doubt that through proper communication, and I understand there's regulations that we need to abide to, that then if there's no signage, we can't ticket people because, you know, I understand there's a lot of moving parts here. But I would be, you know, I would hate to see this be the standard, and I don't mean to you, I would be disappointed, sorry, let me rephrase that, if this was our standard moving forward to communicate if we had to, because again, I'm shocked at the number of poles and signs that now have this beautiful historic gateway to our waterfront is now prevents liabilities for cyclists and but also the beautification that maybe we're not taking into consideration when we're designing our community. So that's really the comments that I have with that.
Okay, before I go to Council Borneman and Councillor Keith, Mr. Kearns had his hand up. So,
Yeah, thank you. Through you, your worship. I might just offer that I don't believe it's a town standard. So we did do some further investigation into exactly what the layout represents there. We actually had a final walkthrough of the Waback Street project today, coincidentally. So we were discussing it with the engineering firm as well. I think it's important for everyone to note that we are held to design standards in a lot of cases, especially with roadway designs. So there's not a lot of options available. If you step out of a standard design, it presents a lot of exposure to risk and liability. So typically the Ontario traffic manuals, in this case in particular, speak to regulatory signs, which parking signs fall under regulatory signs. There are strict requirements, and they aren't optional within that book, that spell out the distance between signs in urban areas. So there's differentiation between different types of roads, rural versus urban. And this design standard adhered to that. So it's not just a matter of aesthetics necessarily. When the traffic manuals dictate shall at a certain distance, not only from a parking enforcement perspective, as far as bylaw is concerned, but from a risk management perspective as well, when we look at road designs. So if the signs are not there, for instance, at the proper spacing according to the Ontario Traffic Manual, first of all, they may not be enforceable because they don't meet the standard. But second of all, if you got on-street parking due to a lack of signs, the municipality can be exposed to more risk and liability from accidents caused from that sort of thing. So that's why we, as much as we would love to be able to step outside of some of those standards, sometimes it's not optional. So anyway, that's a little further on that.
follow up, Councillor Backman, and then we're going to Councillor Borneman.
In regards to the spacing of the regulations of the signage, do we know if those signs are distanced at the maximum distance apart?
Through your worship, I didn't have an opportunity to physically measure them today. We had that discussion with the engineering firm, and typically the designs and the installations follow the traffic manual. So that's where it's a 50-meter spacing on those parking signs in an urban area, or I forget the other term they use, but more of a commercial industrial built up area. There are specifics within the Ontario Traffic Manual, and like I said, for regulatory signage, warning signage, the yellow signs you'll see on highway signage is more flexible. It's more objective rather than subjective, whereas this spells out specifics at 50 meters. It doesn't give us a range.
Councillor Borneman.
I just like to I'm thankful for Mr. Kearns for pointing that out, because I was going to ask a question that I think he answered in that. I just want to point out that the lay of the land has a lot to do with the design there. There was a public meeting. The citizens, I'm sure Councillor Keith will recall as well, that many of the residents in the area were more concerned about the slope of their driveways accessing their property, particularly on the east side, and they were most concerned about the water runoff on the west side of the street. Quite frankly, the town didn't have an option to put a bicycle lane in that area because of the property boundaries. Street's narrow now. It would have been that much narrower had we attempted to install bike lanes and parking. So sometimes you have to work with what you're given.
Councillor Keith?
Yes, I would just add to Councillor Borneman's comments, because I too was at that meeting where it was a public meeting. And those people who attended certainly were aware of the curbs. And in discussion, I recall where somebody asked about cycling, the idea or concept was that the use of the fitness trail would be more beautification. You certainly would see more of that, of our community taking that trail rather than the Wabick Street. But overall, there was not opposition of this plan at all, but rather it was seen as a real positive. So that's all I can add. Thank you.
Councillor Backman? You're muted, Councillor Backman.
Just in regards to the comments Councillor Keith had made regarding the fitness trail, and and I've taken that in consideration because that was the logic that I heard about people getting to our waterfront. But when I look at the children in our community, 9 out of 10, kids we have a trail that goes from point A to point B, and everybody lives in the middle. And most people who are, over, in that middle, they're going down Cascade, they're going down, those streets that are working that way. And, they're not going to go around, at least I don't see the youth doing it. And that's primarily where the concern comes in, is that they're, ideally we want them to use that trail, but that's in reality not happening. So I just think that, if that's the logic in our decision making of that, then we need to reinforce that, somehow, is all I'm saying, because that doesn't seem to be happening at this point.
Anything further? Anyone opposed to passing the bylaw? Nope, that's carried. Moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Keith, that bylaw 2020-7073 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with Harold Elston for reappointment to the officer of the Integrity Commissioner be considered as read a first time. All in favor? And that's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Keith and second by Councillor Horn that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion or comments? Nope. Okay. Anyone opposed to passing the bylaw? Nope, that's carried then. Okay, moved by Councillor Horn, second by Councillor Keith, that bylaw number 2020-7074, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement with the Board of Management for the District of Parry Sound West Home for the Aged for the provision of accessible transportation and the lease of the town's accessible van be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor Backman and second by Councillor Burden that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Discussion. Councillor McCann.
Thank you. This would be for Ms. Phillips then. Thank you for your work on this. This has been a great partnership for Community Support Services and Belvedere Heights. with regards to what we refer to as Big Blue, the big van. And I believe that's what part of what we're talking about here tonight, Stephanie. So my question is now, I've read in the contract that there's some mention about not taking the van out of the province, but I thought there was some concern about just not taking the van out of the municipality of Parry Sound because the tax rebate was supposed to benefit the ratepayers of Parry Sound. So that's question one, and then I have a second one.
Okay, through you, Your Worship. So the agreement does also address taking the van outside of the boundaries of Parry Sound. It's my understanding that the service that Big Blue provides right now is within the boundaries of Parry Sound, but there could be exceptions to that, and for those exceptions, they would have to request, make a written request to take Big Blue outside of the town of Parry Sound.
Oh, so I wasn't aware of that. So then some sort of written request then, if it was necessary, sort of say to take it to, say, Orville for something special out there.
Or for example, if there was service required that we could only get outside of the town, that would be an example of when they may require Big Blue to exit the town of Parry Sound.
Okay. So my other question then is I'm just kind of confused about the amount of money. The notes say that at the end of 2019 there was over $100,000 in the reserve. Is that all? Has that all been delegated towards the expenditures for transportation for community support services, or what? How much money are we actually talking about?
So through Your Worship, currently right now there is approximately around $109,000 in the reserve. That reserve is right now, the reasons we could spend it would be towards maintenance of the vehicle or future capital replacement. And we know that Big Blue is currently valued at over $100,000. So it's not really off what might be estimated for the future replacement of the vehicle. But the town also receives an annual amount from the MTO regarding transit funding. And those funds that we receive are currently going into that reserve as well to add to the value there.
Okay, so we're not talking about depleting that reserve then, is that right?
Right now, I'm not aware of any expenses that would be funded from those dollars, but the expenditures that would qualify would be maintenance of Big Blue or if it required replacement.
Yeah. So I know that one of our vans, one of the older ones, it likely will need to be replaced. So is that something that community support services could consider? It wouldn't be as much as the Big Blue, but it would be one of the, I believe it's the white Dodge van that you see around town from time to time.
So at the present time, Big Blue is used within the town boundaries. And so the costs associated with Big Blue would be included in what could be funded from the MTO dollars. But there are specific requirements of that program that require that the residents of Parry Sound, that trips be originating in Parry Sound or to Parry Sound for residents that would exclude many of the trips that are provided right now from the other van. And I think that's why there was a decision made to segregate the trips in that fashion, where Big Blue would operate within the boundary of Parry Sound and the white van would operate to the other area municipalities.
So looking forward, is it possible that some of that funding and a new contract could be written up between community support services and the town with regards to the replacement of one of the, let's say, less expensive vehicles?
So that may be a more complicated inquiry, which would involve service agreements with municipalities outside of the area. where the funding that would be provided would include populations of the entire area as opposed to just directly the town of Parry Sound at this time. So I do not think that those are at the present moment eligible under the transit program from MTO because of the area that it services at the moment.
Okay. Does
Um,
sound complicated.
yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Borneman.
So just to clarify, there is a finite amount of money in this reserve, and if we use it on another vehicle, we're not likely to have the cash required to replace Big Blue when the time comes.
Yes, that's an important consideration as well, because right now the value equally represents similar value to what it would cost to replace Big Blue at the moment.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments? No. Okay, anyone opposed to passing the bylaw? No, then it's carried. Okay. Moved by Councillor McCann, second by Councillor Burden, that bylaw number 2020-7076 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council be considered as read a first time. All in favor? That's carried. All members in favor of having the second and third readings? That's carried. Moved by Councillor McCann, second by Councillor Burden, that the bylaw above mentioned be considered as read a second and third time, passed, signed, and sealed. Anyone opposed to passing the confirming bylaw? No? Okay, it's carried. Prior to adjourning, I'd like to offer the following information to the public regarding the next council meeting. The next regular meeting of council for the town of Parry Sound is scheduled for Tuesday, October the 20th, 2020 at 7 p.m. This meeting will be held via Zoom conferencing and will be live streamed and recorded. All regular council meetings are held at 7 p.m. on the first and third Tuesday of each month, except January and August, where only one regular meeting is scheduled. The council meeting schedule, notices of special council meetings, complete agendas and minutes, and instructions on accessing live streamed and recorded council meetings are all posted on the town's website. Go to www.parrysound.ca under news and public notices. Your TV airs council meetings on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. following a regular council meeting. For Cogeco listings, contact www.yourtv.tv. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and everyone hangs around for a closed session. We'll give staff half an hour to make sure that everything's closed up, so we're just on, and thank you, everyone.